Get out all your Squadron Hawks. Squadron Hawks. Squadron Hawks. Squadron Hawks. Get out all your Squadron Hawks.
This is Pauper to the People, Episode 4.
Episode 4.
My name's Chris.
And this is Tuna.
How's it going?
Fantastic, sir. Fantastic. I'm excited.
Cool. Me too.
So what's been going on? What's happened in the last week?
Well, we got my band's opening for Taproot tomorrow.
Yes, very exciting.
So that'll be fun. And then other than that, my daughter really started T-ball today.
Oh yeah, I think you brought that up last week.
Yeah.
That's exciting.
This was her first practice, and her concern was having to remember everyone's names.
Yeah. That was the biggest concern, not necessarily the game itself.
No, just learning everyone's names.
I was talking to your wife, and she was saying that they only have 2 practices, and they already have a game after that.
Yeah.
That's pretty accelerated.
T-ball games is basically like watching everyone just scramble for the ball regardless of what position they're in, so I'm pretty sure it's not going to be super...
No, you're shortstop!
Yeah. Next week we'll explain what a shortstop is to you kids.
To you kids.
So that's pretty much about it for me. What's going on with you?
Just, living the dream. Still working kind of part-time at another store, filling in. My schedule's kind of in limbo for the next few weeks. Have the big weekends coming up. I think I mentioned them last week, but they're getting closer. Things are starting to get a little stressful. I have to find us a place to stay / maybe hotel room in Spokane while we're up there.
Yeah.
Yeah, haven't quite nailed that down yet. What else? Kind of upset lately that since my schedule's changed and so foobarred that I haven't been able to go down to Adventures Underground lately and get in on some F&M or just something. Just browse the comics or play some casual.
Yeah, I'm planning on going to the new Phyrexia pre-release myself.
I would love to. Got a new little dog. She's a lovely pain in the ass. Got her spayed. That was some money.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I wanted to bring this up because I wanted to rub it in and make them feel bad. Andrea and Nick killed my betta fish. They during the bowl cleaning, if you will, that Andrea usually does every couple weeks, the fish jumped out of the ladle, did a half gainer right into the garbage disposal side of the sink, and after 20 minutes of trying their quote-unquote trying their best to get my fish out, Nick realized that I was 5 minutes away from coming home from work, and he basically said, F it, there's not enough time, and he just went, boop, flipped the switch, ground my fish into fish food. Poor little guy. Other than that, just been playing Magic, been playing the new Back to the Future game, and Portal 2 that just came out Tuesday.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Cool. So let's get into some news.
Let's do it.
Alright. First item I got here is that it's Commons Week on Daily MTG.
And what does that mean exactly?
All of the articles that they have on a weekly basis are focusing on commons.
I like it.
So yeah, definitely. There's some interesting articles about what goes into making a common card common from Mark Rosewater, and as well as a bunch of other writers. So, and actually today, the building on a budget section, they did the Pauper Perfect Storm deck.
Nice.
So, and of course everyone flames the writer for saying that's one of the most expensive decks in Pauper. How can that be building on a budget? But
it is what it is.
Internet.
So, question on that: by the time any of the listeners get to hear this podcast, will the Commons Week be over then?
No, I'm hoping to have it up have it sent off tonight. So
no way.
I'm gonna burn them. I'm gonna burn the midnight
time.
oil. That's not record time.
Record time, sir.
So, but I mean, the articles will be archived anyway, so you can always go back and check them out. But I think it's important that if you're aware of, if you're not already, dailymtg.com. So check out the articles as the week progresses and let Magic know that you proudly rock the common banner.
We should probably, hit a link to that?
Definitely.
From our Facebook?
We can do that for sure.
Yeah, cool. Other news, the new Phyrexia, the entire spoiler list got leaked early.
Yeah.
I know you're not excited about that at all. Actually,
No.
you expressed your anger about that.
I love the internet for its ability to let me play Magic online and to communicate with people and friends throughout the world and to be able to, if I have a question about something, just be able to get on Google and find it out.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
What I don't like is the way that
people abuse that power.
Yeah, pretty much.
With great power comes great responsibility.
Yeah, and so the analogy I made was it was like going into your parents' closet and finding your Christmas presents early.
And see, when you said that, I was like, I loved that. I was that kid. I did that on purpose.
I always felt guilty, man.
Well, I totally felt guilty, but you don't let the parents in on that.
Well, yeah, but I mean, it's just, there's a reason why they spoil the cards the way they do.
I know. I get you.
I mean, if you're excited for it, more power to you. It's just, it's like, nice going. However it happened, and I mean, yeah, I don't know.
It's too late now. Now it's on multiple websites.
And that's just it. It's, the age we live in, the second it gets out, it's too late.
Yeah, definitely.
So someone's getting fired.
If something's on the internet, it's over.
Yeah, pretty much. So
Pamela Anderson knows that.
So actually all my notes were, up to 44 spoilers on new Phyrexia, and then the shit, hit the proverbial fan.
Yes, definitely. I sent you the link to our email last night. It was like 12:45. Oh my god, Chris, full spoilers. I thought you were going to be stoked, but then you were the exact opposite, so I was sad.
Well, it's not that I'm not stoked. I
looked at it as an opportunity to give us plenty of material to talk about commons today, but actually it's probably the best that we don't.
See, I didn't look.
Oh, you didn't?
No.
Oh man. I'm excited.
I'm going to wait until Wizard says, yes, it happened. It was a snafu. Go ahead and check it out.
Like that's going to happen. They did start their official spoiler list, though.
Yeah.
There's not very many, but they did start it. I think probably because of that.
Yeah, probably. The other thing is that in the cards that were officially spoiled, I was looking over the basic lands, the artwork on them, and what I thought was really cool, and I don't know if you noticed or not, but the land cards are the completed artifact lands from the original Mirrodin.
I did not notice, and I believe you did mention that to me. However, I was unfamiliar with the land art from the original Mirrodin, as I wasn't around then, and just don't care to ever look back, particularly to look at basic lands from other sets. When I run into them, I'm like, oh, that's a cool land, but that's cool though. I will definitely look into that and check out what you're talking about.
Makes you wish they were full art.
I want a new set with full art land so bad.
Probably gonna have to wait a decade.
A decade?
So there's also a new Beggars Can Be Choosers article up on mTGOacademy.com. So,
which is?
That's the Nick Z, the gentleman who writes the Pauper articles. And so he's being very thorough with these decks that he runs, and it's a great resource. This time he covered goblins.
So he's like us, but good.
Us, but thorough.
Us, but thorough. We're going to do goblins one of these days.
So we're going to put a link to it in the show notes, but he actually mentioned us on the article.
He did? He's a great person.
He is. Well, he's the one who said it was okay for us to make fun of the South.
Of Georgia?
Yeah. So.
Classic.
Do you have any other news articles you wanted to discuss?
I was just going to ask you about something, but it's already slipped my mind. It's like that.
Cool.
No, not cool.
Well, sort of cool.
If I remember, I'm sure I'll bring it up.
So, again, we're going to run over 2 decks this week. And I'm going to take the reins on the first one this time. I won the rock, paper, scissors last week and
got the mono black rats.
Got the mono black rats.
Kind of glad you did, because you spent a heck of a lot more tickets on your deck than I did mine.
About 25.
By the way, you are over budget this month, sir.
I'm over budget this month, but
you are over budget.
Doing it for the sake of the podcast.
For the people.
Yeah, so I'm willing to fudge my budget ideas and goals until after we get all the decks discussed.
I see. So, what?
But I mean, I sold off a Mox Opal and got 10 tickets that way.
Say what?
I took it on the two. I took my Affinity deck on the 2-man queues and won a few packs and sold them for tickets. So I'm not really that behind on it. I'm breaking even on it. So.
Do you always just sell the packs, or do you ever open them? And
I never
mythics?
open the packs.
Never?
No.
Even though that what's inside the pack could be worth a lot more than the pack itself.
What are the odds?
I don't know. The odds are probably bad. I mean, I'm not a gambling man, but
the best value you can get from your packs is to either use them to draft or sell them for tickets.
Right.
So it's just like a new car. You drive it off the lot and it depreciates.
I've done that.
Yeah, I know that one too. So anyway, mono black rats.
Getting onto it.
You're acting like I cut you off.
Oh.
So,
son of a... No, I'm kidding.
There's a lot of comments about this deck being the Swiss Army knife of Pauper.
I could definitely see that. That's a very appropriate title.
Yeah, and it took me about 20 matches to get it.
Yeah.
Because I started out...
I do remember at first you were kind of frustrated with it. You were telling me, I don't know if I get this. I just don't know what I'm doing.
Well, to be quite honest, I downright disliked playing it.
Really?
Yeah.
The entire time, even when you got it?
Up until about... Yeah, especially when I first started. Up until about... Not last night, where we played a bunch of games with some podcast listeners.
Mm-hmm. That was fun, by the way.
Yeah, but a few days ago, it just started to click. And so that really hammers home that point we were trying to make last week, where you got to give these decks time.
Yes, definitely.
So, but basically, they call it the Swiss Army knife of Pauper because the large toolbox of options you have to deal with almost anything that comes your way.
Yeah, you really do.
And it just takes time to learn what you're doing with it. So, but like I mentioned, it was approximately 25 tickets, give or take a few here and there. But some of the notable spendy cards included Unearth, which I picked up for 1.25 tickets a piece, Crypt Rats, which was 1.75 tickets a piece, and then Choking Sands, which was 0.75 tickets a piece, if you can find them. It took me a lot of effort to find Choking Sands.
A lot of different bots, or did you have to go on the community and look for them? Or
a little bit of everything.
Really?
It was, there's one, pick it up. And, and just what you deal with sometimes with cards that aren't in print anymore. So the deck also runs a number of 1 and 2 of cards and relies on card draw to pull them out when they're needed. So, starting with the creatures, in my deck I have Chittering Rats, which my notes say is a house of a card in this deck. So not only is it a 2/2 for 3, which is a significant body in Pauper, and is actually the toughness is pretty important in this deck. The 2 toughness is not bad.
It's not bad. It's not great.
Yeah.
Firebolt will take care of him, or Lightning Bolt, rather.
Yeah. But the ability it has to force the opponent to put a card back on top of his or her library is great for screwing up tempo, removing options from a player's hand, and just the morale hit of having to draw a card you already had in your hand again.
I absolutely hate that card. I absolutely hate it. There's no other way to say it. I hate it. It ruins my day. It screws up the game. And even after it's out, who cares? It's not a big threat. Yeah, you're talking about the toughness, but it's already done its damage the second it comes out.
Mm-hmm.
So, and actually killing it actually doesn't benefit me at all because I know you have Unearth in that deck.
Which we'll get into in a little bit.
Yeah, exactly.
So, anyway, I run 4 of them in my deck.
What set's that card from?
Darksteel.
Darksteel. And you might have already said this, but how many tickets was it?
He was a...
It's probably relatively cheap.
0.11. Yeah, if they were less than 0.25 tickets.
Oh, I guess I have it wrote down here as 0.08.
Oh, okay.
So he's cheap.
Yeah.
10 cents.
Next on the list is Cryptorats, which is in most situations your game ender.
Yeah, you've killed me that way quite a few times.
So run them out on your second main phase with mana to spare and wipe the board.
Mm-hmm.
Run him early to draw out Burn Hate, especially if you've got multiples of him in your hand. Keep a mana open and ping everyone if he gets burnt. That was my favorite thing to do. Is you got him on play, you got him out in play, you've got 1 mana available, and someone throws a bolt on him. Just activate his ability, sack him,
do its damage. I typically used to kind of wait for the setup where you only had maybe 1 mana available to you, so it wasn't as bad, and then I'd lightning bolt him.
Yeah. The nice part about it is, for a black mana, you know, it deals 1 damage, and it will deal it to every creature and every player. So, definitely a Suicide Black theme going on there too.
Yeah, definitely sacrifice your own life and your own creatures to win the game.
Yep.
You did that quite a bit, actually.
And that was another one of those scenarios where I started to see, oh, this is how this deck works. So, you're checking them out?
Well, I'm just going to pull up the prices. He's in a few different sets.
Mm-hmm.
7th edition looks like being the popular one. 1.65 tickets a piece. So he was a little on the spendy side.
Yeah. So, but one of those cards where he's probably going to be included if you're running black.
Yeah.
Almost always.
Oh, definitely. And I mean, I personally saw the potential. How did you? Well, we'll get into that in a second. Okay. Actually.
Next up, I've got Ravenous Rats. So, which is early hand disruption on a stick for 1 and a black, making an opponent discard as soon as he enters the battlefield, and making him discard as soon as possible is great for tempo disruption. And it's especially disheartening if they've had to mulligan.
Ooh, very disheartening.
Now, some people are saying that instead of, they sub out the Ravenous Rats and they put in Liliana Spectre.
Okay.
Which she costs 2 black and a colorless, and she's a 2/1 with flying that has the same ability. When she enters the battlefield, opponent discards a card.
Okay.
So I can see the merit behind it, but I wanted a 2-mana creature to get out as soon as possible instead of a 3-mana creature.
Yeah, and in your deck, that's important, I think.
So, and I'm running 4 of those. Next is Phyrexian Rager.
Ravenous Rats, by the way, is also from several different sets, and it's dirt cheap. 0.02 tickets, 0.05 on the high end.
Very cheap.
Very cheap.
So Phyrexian Rager is another 2/2. He's a good body to swing with. The 1 life of his ability, which is when he enters the battlefield, you pay 1 life and you draw a card.
Card draw for life sack.
So it's not even an issue compared to getting to draw a card. So,
and he's from
Mirrodin Besieged, and he's from an older set. I'm not remembering off the top of my head.
Really? I did not know that.
He's a reprint.
I knew he was from Besieged. So, obviously in multiple sets as well. Usually when that's the case, especially in the newest set, he's relatively cheap.
Yeah, exactly. You know, you're going to find the majority of them probably as the Besieged version.
Yeah, exactly.
Run 4 of them.
Cool.
In my deck. Last creature is the Okiba Gang Shinobi. Now that he costs 5, but he's got Ninjutsu 4.
Which I think you've almost always used that way.
Yeah, you almost don't want to use him the other way because he is another one of those burn magnets. So, but when he does combat damage to a player, that player sacrifices 2 cards. So,
very powerful, very annoying.
So odds are what's going to happen, and what seems like it happened most of the time with me, was either a Chittering Rats or Ravenous Rats is swinging in, and then you ninjutsu, put him into play, and they discard 2 cards, and then he promptly dies to some sort of removal.
Yeah.
But I'm running 2 of them. 2 of them in my deck, and I'll explain why in a little bit.
And he is from, what's that?
He is from the Kamigawa block, Betrayers of Kamigawa.
Okay, and it looks like he's relatively cheap as well.
Mm-hmm.
0.08 tickets.
Yeah, so that rounds out the creatures. Up next is the spells, and the first one I listed was Duress.
That's the first one I have listed, too.
And my notes say fight dirty. Or at least make it seem that way.
My notes say FML.
Also appropriate. So for 1 black mana at sorcery speed, target opponent reveals their hand, and you choose a non-land, non-creature, and they discard it. So not only are you forcing them to discard, but you get to see what their hand looks like.
Yep.
So
do that turn 1. Oh gosh.
Turn 1 and turn 2.
And
sometimes.
turn 2. Sometimes turn 3 if you really want to be a dick. It's also in many sets, I believe. Most recent being M11, so it's super common. Dirt cheap, 0.02 tickets.
And I run 3 of them.
3? Mm-hmm. Not 4.
I'll explain in a little bit.
Okay, I'm ready to listen.
So up next is Unearth,
Ugh.
which is, again, a single black mana. And you return a target creature card with converted mana cost 3 or less to the battlefield.
Chittering Rats?
Yeah, or Crypt Rats.
Or Crypt Rats.
Blow up a Crypt Rat and get them back.
That's rough.
It is. And that's, recurring your sweeper and your blowing up the board effect. So with almost every creature in this deck having an enter the battlefield ability, this is a crucial card.
Mm-hmm.
And I've got 3 of them in the deck. Now, up next is Sign in Blood, which is 2 cards for 2 life. Great value.
Yeah, that's a wonderful card.
Mm-hmm.
Is it instant or sorcery?
It is a sorcery.
Oh, okay.
No, it's an instant, excuse me.
Huh. Instant.
It is an instant.
Dun, dun, dun.
So, you want to fact check that one for me?
No.
Yeah, you do.
Dude, I always want to fact check you.
I know. Hip check me. So,
you were right the first time.
Sorcery?
Sorcery.
Okay. Oh, yeah. I was trying to remember situations where I played it, and you're right, it's a sorcery. So, it can damage an opponent in a pinch, too, which is really...
Yeah, finish opponents off when they have 2 or less life.
That was on my bucket list of things to do, is kill someone with Sign in Blood. And I managed to do that with his deck finally, so I was pretty happy.
When you've used it on me, even if it wasn't the killing blow, I think you used it on me when I was pretty much down there, and then I think you finished me off with Crypt Rats. But when you did it at first, I think I'd already pressed F6 to do the auto yields.
Yeah, you were like, what did you do?
Yeah, because all of a sudden I had extra cards in my hand. I was like, what just happened?
Okay. This is actually, I wrote this down. So this is my favorite play that I've ever done. So, maybe it makes me lame that this one's it. But I Sign in Blood my opponent when he had 0 cards. And then I duressed one of them. And then I played Ravenous Rats. So I took away 2 life, gave him 2 cards, and made him discard both of them. So it was just rude.
That was definitely rude.
So play 4 of those.
Huh. Was that just a random match you did that too?
Yeah, that was a 2-man queue. I ended up winning.
Nice.
So then I've got Tendrils of Corruption, Spinning Darkness, and Corrupt, which are all damage spells that give you life as well. So these negate the life loss that you take from cards like Sign in Blood and Phyrexian Rager.
Mm-hmm.
Corrupt can also target a player for an awesome life total swing.
Yes.
So I run 3 of those. Tendrils of Corruption targets creatures. I run 1. Spitting Darkness can be cast for exiling the top 3 cards of your graveyard instead of paying its mana cost.
That's a dirty card.
So that's a great alternative to paying for it, but make sure you aren't exiling an unearthed target that you really needed or wanted.
Do you get to choose what you exile?
No, but
just take the 3 off the top.
Takes the 3 off the top. But
Okay.
if when multiple creatures are going to the graveyard, you get to select their order.
But typically, it's a kind of a game ender card, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, let me see. And then, so my notes say run 2 so you don't wipe your own board. Wipe your own graveyard out completely and negate your options. Spinning Darkness does 3 damage to target creature and you gain 3 life. So Corrupt is the one that is also the really big game ender.
Oh, Corrupt.
Especially if you want to not only beat them, but gain a bunch of life at the end doing it too. So, I run 1 Disfigure, which target creature gets -2/-2 until the end of turn.
Only 1?
Mm-hmm.
Is there a reason behind that?
I like a toolbox of options, and I was looking at a couple of different decks on the daily events, the deck lists, and I was looking through some forums and stuff, and this deck, with the amount of Sign and Bloods and the Phyrexian Ragers, I'm actually going through my deck pretty quickly, getting the answers I need.
I was just going to say that. I've seen Disfigure quite a few times for having only 1 in your deck.
Mm-hmm. And then Doomblade, I've got 1 of those in there. Now, Iggly Bob, one of the cast listeners.
One of the faithful listeners.
He had actually mentioned that he doesn't really have the balls to run Doomblade in the main board. That was his exact quote. And so he was suggesting that what he ends up doing is subbing out Doomblade for Grasp of Darkness.
Yeah, the -4/-4.
Yeah. And in a mono black deck, black is just the same as black and a colorless.
True.
So, but I'm running 1 of those, and then I'm running 1 Echoing Decay.
Okay.
Echoing Decay is target creature and all creatures with the same name as the one that's targeted get -2/-2 until the end of turn.
Ouch.
So yeah.
Ouch.
Now, sideboard. This is where it becomes apparent why there's such a large selection of 1 and 2 ofs. Because game 1, you kind of want as many options as possible.
Mm-hmm.
A little bit of this, a little bit of that, and then kind of get a feel for what your opponent's playing. Now, in the sideboard, there's a lot of extras to increase the 1-ofs once you're aware of the game plan. So there's an extra Duress set you can have a total of 4. For decks that draw cards and keep their hands full.
Mm-hmm.
There's an extra Disfigure for extra spot removal.
Okay.
There's an extra Doomblade for extra spot removal against non-black decks, or again, Grasp of Darkness. There's another Echoing Decay for a specific sweeper for decks that run lots of copies.
Okay. There's
2 more Tendrils of Corruptions, a creature killer that regains life if you're being raced. And there's 1 more Spinning Darkness, removal if your own board presence isn't being dealt with. So if your guys aren't getting thrown into the graveyard, and it's just spells that are in there, you got a couple of Duresses and a Sign in Blood, or a couple of other types of spells, and not a lot of creatures that are necessarily trying to be returned to the battlefield, you can throw a Spinning Darkness out there, exile all of your instants and sorceries.
And then what's the next one?
4 Choking Sands.
Which is what, exactly? I think you maybe mentioned it earlier, but...
Destroy target non-swamp land. If it was non-basic, it deals 2 damage to its controller.
So, land destruction?
Mm-hmm. Land destruction to kill ramp decks.
Nice.
And punish players who use Ravnica block lands.
Okay, so... I think you mentioned, when you did mention earlier, I think you might have said that those were on the spendier side or something?
Yeah, the ones I found were.
Okay. What set's that from?
That is from Mirage.
Okay. Just pulling up really quick. Looks like there might be 1 ticket apiece.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay.
Next, I've got 3 Befouls, which is more removal that can target a creature or a land.
Okay. Does it destroy it, per se?
And it can't be regenerated.
Nice. Love that.
And then I run a 1 of Death Denied, which is mass graveyard recursion if you need it. So if you need to flip the switch and bring all of your X amount of creatures from the graveyard back into your hand, you can just play Death Denied.
Nice.
Bring them all back. So that's the sideboard.
And typically, just as a general idea, what do you usually sub out for some of these cards?
Actually, I do a lot of subbing out of the one copy of Duress to give myself the extra copy of Spinning Darkness.
Okay.
Has been my main thing.
I could see that.
Mm-hmm. But realistically, even though the one and the two ofs, it seems like you're just running a lot of little things that you might not see when you need them.
Mm-hmm.
The deck's actually really good at. There's a lot of games and quite a few 2-man queues that I won where I didn't even need to sideboard. It's like the package that's available from the get-go is
the real deal Holyfield.
Is versatile enough to get me there. So, and that leads us into the strengths of the deck. So, monocolored.
Yep,
obviously.
I have that too on my list.
So, and then there's massive amounts of discard, damage, and hand disruption attached to the creatures you play. Graveyard Recursion allows for more options than what's in your hand. Mm-hmm. So not only are you looking at cards from your hand to play, but if you've got an Unearth or a Death Denied in your hand, I've got all this stuff available too.
And I think what's a huge strength with that is that a lot of that is early hand control
mm-hmm.
and discard. And so, when your opponent decides to keep his hand, not mulligan, this is a nice hand, and then you completely disrupt that the first 2, maybe even 3 turns, that changes the game dramatically for your opponent.
Yeah, this deck's a spirit breaker.
Yeah, exactly.
it's it's solid on its own, but it really excels at just forcing your opponent into plan B or C really quickly.
Yeah, it's very, very hard to recover as your opponent. It's very hard to recover from.
Mm-hmm. And so there's many sideboard options to suit a specific matchup, like we discussed,
mm-hmm.
which is that's what you want in a sideboard. And like we mentioned, it's a demoralizing deck for your opponent to play against.
Oh yeah.
Weaknesses. the one I ran into right away. I played at Daily Event and got smoked by this deck twice.
What was that?
The green deck that plays Rancor
mm-hmm.
and Armadillo Cloak.
The little lizard that has madness.
Mm-hmm. The Basking Root Wallet.
Yeah, that's the one.
Basking Root Wallet has a madness cost of put it into your graveyard and you can play it for its madness cost instead, and its madness cost is 0.
Ouch.
So I'm running, I'm thinking I'm going to be pretty slick, play a Ravenous Rats, and, he discards his Root Wall and plays it for free.
That backfired.
So, giving your opponent an opportunity to play a free card upon discarding is just not good for you.
Yeah, definitely. I actually also listed the Madness and then also flashback abilities.
Mm-hmm.
Same situation there.
Mm-hmm. There's also a lot of choices to be made when piloting the deck, which gets back into getting your games in with it. But it requires some real knowledge of what to play and when. And the only way you're going to do that is by, taking your licks and, forging through them and just riding it out until you start to get a hang of it. So the large toolbox of removal spells can be a difficult choice. And Game 1 doesn't really have many multiples of a specific type of removal. It's more of a grab bag, and you still have to draw what you're looking for. Mm-hmm. So while there's ways to do it, with Sign of Blood, Phyrexian Rager, doesn't mean you're going to get what you're looking for.
Right. I actually put that as a weakness as well. Self-sacrifice to draw cards. Mm-hmm. And typically, just from what I've experienced with you, the games are relatively quick, but I imagine if a game gets drawn out pretty long, that might actually hurt you in the long run.
Yeah. I'm looking to do very specific things as early as possible so that I can stabilize before you do.
Exactly.
Now the draw engines cost you some life. Phyrexian Rager, Sign in Blood, you're paying for those with life as well as mana. So when you're at 20, or even all the way down to around 10, it's not a big deal. But when push comes to shove, if someone swings in for the last point of damage, and you had done a Sign in Blood or two, you could have been at 5 instead of 1. You potentially.
Exactly.
So a couple of things to look out for that. I guess I put them in the weakness section, but they're more just like a consideration you need to make. Is that Unearth can't fetch Okiba Gang Shinobi.
And why is that?
Because it costs more than 3.
Oh,
yeah.
Right.
The Unearth ability, it will take a creature that's 3 or less. So that's the main reason I cut a couple of them. So, and then don't blow up a Crypt Rat if you have an open attack with other guys. So if you do a Crypt Rat on your first main phase, and there's no board presence on the other side, you just killed, all of your potential attackers.
For no reason.
Yeah, when you could have done it on the second main phase. And that's just, Magic Online 201 level courses. Yep.
Yeah.
So, or if you have less life than your opponent and you're trying to go for lethal, don't blow up your Crypt Rat. Which comes up when you're using those Sign in Bloods and those Phyrexian Ragers.
So I'm curious, I don't know if you ran into this, but what happens if you and your opponent are both within lethal damage of blowing up your Crypt Rat? What determines the win or lose there?
Yeah, I don't know.
Huh.
I haven't actually run. I've been with this deck more than a lot of them. I've been very aware of what my life total is, and so there's actually a lot of players I played against who see what I'm doing, and so they'll make a play that might not be, correct in normal circumstances, but all they're trying to do is get me lower than them.
Right.
So I can't Crypt Rat them for the win.
Kind of rope you into doing it.
Yeah. It's like, why would you burn me instead of this creature? Oh, I see. He's trying to get me lower than him.
Yeah.
Life-wise, so I can't use this Crypt Rat to just kill him outright.
I wonder if it goes to whoever's life is least, like if somebody goes into the negative as opposed to 0.
Yeah, or it might have something to do with the stack, or it might have something to do with whose turn it is.
Yeah, that's true. I wonder. I'm sure our listeners out there will definitely know the answer. We'll
if you do, please let us know, because that's
a unique situation that just seems kind of funny.
Yeah. But really, that is kind of my breakdown of the Mono Black Rats deck.
Okay.
I'll post a deck list on the Facebook page with what I'm running, and a couple of the notes as to what some people are running instead.
So, real quick, just a couple questions I had.
Yeah, absolutely.
What is your answer to flying creatures?
Blow them up.
Blow them up. Okay.
Well, it's...
I mean, a deck that's based off of early flyers, like maybe fairies per se. They get out fairies for 1 or 2 mana, and they can, get board advantage as far as creatures go.
If they're running multiples of the same type of fairy, I'm gonna board in my Echoing Decays. If it's just a specific instance, I'm gonna try and disfigure it. I'm going to look at using a Crypt Rat for just, for instance, 2 or 3 mana, just to sweep the board.
Okay.
So I have, if I sweep a board and it takes out one of my Ravenous Rats and one of my Chittering Rats and one of my Crypt Rats,
you don't care because you have Unearth.
Exactly. Which is very relevant.
Gotcha.
So, but ultimately, I went from not understanding this deck and kind of regretting that I ended up having to play it this week to actually really enjoying it.
Okay, so real quick, that was actually one of my questions. You mentioned at the very start of bringing this deck up that you didn't like it.
Mm-hmm.
So, but now you're saying that you do enjoy it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, and like I had said, it just comes from, what am I doing? How does this deck work? I don't want to play it. I'm getting my ass handed to me. And actually the big part of it was
you just not being able to utilize it properly.
Yeah, and especially I've got a Disfigure and a choking Choking Sands.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, in my hand, and like a Spinning Darkness. Which one of these do I play? And it's just literally, you got to get to the point where this match I play this at this point. Or I've got a pretty good idea of what I think he or she, my opponent, is trying to accomplish. So I'm going to make this play. Gotcha. So it went from feeling like I didn't have enough answers to realizing that game one is designed to just give you a little bit of everything. And then you have to really sideboard more so than a couple other decks I've played to tweak it, which is, Swiss Army knife of Pauper. Mm-hmm. And it's actually, toward the end, I really enjoyed playing this deck.
Okay.
Enough that I'm going to keep it together.
Okay. Well, I was concerned because, like I said, you mentioned that you didn't necessarily like playing it, but so you do.
Yeah.
I figured it was right up your alley because I think you love black. Do you
I
not?
do.
Yeah.
I do.
Okay.
And, it was right about 20 games where it was, and I equate it to learning how to play guitar. Any of your listeners out there who play guitar or even play any sort of instrument. But when I was teaching myself how to play guitar, you go through your exercises and you go through your motions for how to strum. And it's frustrating and you can't get it. And then one day you pick it up and it just clicks. Holy shit, I'm strumming, or holy shit, I'm running this deck properly. And from that point forward, it's just I was well under 500, 50-50 with the deck, mm-hmm. as far as wins and losses go. And then my wins just started climbing up. It's like, okay, I'm seeing how to play it effectively. So just like any deck, especially one that you might not have built from scratch. When we're going over these deck evaluations, we're approaching them as new players and looking to what the metagame is and looking to and how other people play stuff. And so it's like, this wasn't my deck originally, but now I feel like it's my deck.
Feel experienced enough to play it properly?
Exactly.
Okay.
So just one other question. I was curious, how well does it fare, and possibly what are the answers to faster and more aggressive style decks? Okay. In the matches I've played, it destroys Storm.
Do go on.
There's so much discard and so much early game disruption that if you've got the proper hand and if
somebody starts with the perfect storm, so to speak,
I played a couple of Storm matches in the 2-man queues, and
wrecked their day, huh?
Yeah, a bunch more in casual and tournament practice, and it's like they could not get to where they were going. I actually had a guy do the whole Storm, went off on Storm, and I was just sitting there watching, and he didn't get what he had. Too much of what he needed was already in his graveyard.
It makes me laugh, and it brings me much joy because this deck is roughly half the cost of a Storm deck.
Yeah, and I mean Storm has its good matchups, and Storm has its bad matchups. Any deck has its good and its bad matchups. So, but man, and then the deck that you're going to be discussing, the blue-red Izzet Post, it was kind of the same situation.
Right.
Where if you've got combos and you've got a specific order you need to play your cards, and I know what you're looking for, I know what I'm going to be duressing.
Yeah, by game 2, yikes.
So, it's a really enjoyable deck. If you're a fan of decks that are going to take a little bit of time to develop into your own thing, and if you're a fan of a deck that just has a lot of graveyard recursion, has a lot of shenanigans that go on when your cards enter the battlefield, and you're willing to sacrifice some of your own life to effectively get what you're looking for, it's definitely a good deck to play.
There's really a lot that goes on with this deck.
Yeah.
I mean, some of it's behind the scenes even, but there's a lot that goes on.
Yeah, there's as much to do with, and it's not like Affinity in that it doesn't play itself. You've got to play this deck, and you need to know what you're doing, and get to that point. But I end up enjoying myself.
Yeah, I definitely like how there's answers to almost everything in that deck.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely cool. I honestly, if it wasn't quite so many tickets, I'd probably dive in, and I might in the future. Just watching you play it looked super fun to play.
And looking at the daily lists that are up on Daily MTG, the decks of the week feature, there's almost always a mono black rat stack that's somewhere in the top 10. So it's, it may not always be the best, and it may lose, but it's going to lose
admirably,
and it's going to be your fault. You lost. You didn't play something right. You didn't get what you were looking for, and your opponent outplayed you. It's definitely a deck that forces you to become a better player.
Yeah, definitely think more what you're doing.
So yeah, that's Mono Black Rats.
Right on. I enjoyed it.
I did too.
Is this a deck that you'll be playing in the future and kind of always sticking with?
Honestly, this has replaced Pauper as my favorite deck. Not Pauper, Affinity as my favorite deck.
Really?
Yeah. Huh. So this
you're gonna stick with it and do two-man queues?
Yeah, I had mentioned in the first episode that I was an aggro player and not much of a control player.
This has changed your mind?
Yeah, it has. It has. Once you start to see what control type cards.
But this is the kind of a darker side of control.
Yeah.
I mean, typically when you say the word control in referring to Magic, people usually think probably blue first.
Mm-hmm.
But this is kind of the darker side of that, where you're sacrificing your own life to get cards, making your opponents discard.
And I'm still swinging in with dudes. There's still aggro elements to it. I'll swing in with a Ravenous Rats and switch it out for the Shinobi.
Oh, I hate the Shinobi. Discarding 2 cards when that hits is a slap to the face.
And if I'm curving out properly, and I play a Ravenous Rats turn 2, Chittering Rats turn 3, and then say a Phyrexian Rager turn 4. By turn 5, I'm still swinging in for 5 damage, which isn't insignificant, especially.
Oh, that's respectable.
Yeah, so you're still tapping guys and swinging in. It's just a little more sinister what goes on, even if they die.
I loved it.
Yeah.
So what was your? You might have said this, but what was your biggest, as far as decks go, your biggest challenge? Your biggest threat, if you will.
It was definitely the mono green, what I saw so far.
Okay.
The
madness.
Yeah, when your whole deck revolves around trying to disrupt someone's hand, and their deck is designed around, go ahead and disrupt me. I've got answers for it. There's not a lot you can do.
Ouch, yeah.
And then, my guys aren't huge, and
green dudes are.
Yeah, sure I can chomp and sure I can bring them back, but I've only got a certain amount of unearths in my deck.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually my shenanigans are going to catch up with me if you've got a way to deal with them.
Gotcha.
So,
all right, I think that might wrap it up.
I feel good about it.
Yeah.
So questions or comments, let us know.
Yeah, definitely. Just post them on the Facebook page and or even on the deck list website that we use, the deckbuilder, whatever it is, .com.
Mm-hmm.
It'll be up on the Facebook page tomorrow.
I'm going to focus on getting the cast out tonight, so depending on if I'm falling asleep with my face on the keyboard. But
like I did last night.
Yeah,
but definitely by the end of the week, I'm sure.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, you have that show tomorrow.
Yeah.
You're busy tomorrow.
Yeah, I'm going to be very busy tomorrow.
Chris rocking out.
Another reason to get it done tonight, because I will have no time tomorrow.
Yikes. You got to get this out before the end of the week.
Yep. Oh, yeah. Before Commons Week is over.
Before Commons Week is over. I just love hearing people's feedback. I was playing online before I came over, and they were like, "Oh man, nice cast this week." And I was like, "We haven't even recorded this week's yet. You must be referring to last week's, and you just listened to it."
That's cool.
I mean, no, it's totally cool. I loved it. I ate it right up like Pac-Man. Map, 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 map. I'm getting a little buzzed.
Already? Oh, you're on beer 3. Okay.
I'm on beer 3, and I didn't eat much for dinner. I ate a salad.
Yeah, that's not going to help you out.
I know.
That's going to come back to haunt you.
Dude.
Be unearthing that salad into the toilet.
Big dudes aren't meant to eat salads for dinner.
So you covered Izzet Post.
Yes, I did.
I wanted to start you out here by asking you how your deck decision came about.
How did it come about? You mean as far as losing the rock, paper, scissors match last week?
Well, that was obvious, but I mean, you lost and it was like, okay, I mean...
I think you
take
first
what's left and cover
suggested
something
Izzet.
else. Well, I suggested burn.
Right. I didn't want to do burn just because, for the same reasons that I ran into troubles even doing this deck. Yeah. I just didn't feel like I had enough time to focus on burn. I think burn might take a little bit longer than like 6 days. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of burn spells out there that I am completely unaware of. I mean, I was getting a lot of suggestions for various burn spells even for this deck that I was like, really? Didn't even know. So, I'll really do my homework if I end up doing the burn deck.
I would say this deck, especially after last night, is really our first deck that's kind of like by the people, for the people.
Yeah. Well, actually, the way I set it up to do on the podcast is I did a small segment on the more traditional Izzet Post version of the Izzet deck, and then I went with Izzet Rogue is what I dubbed it, because it is more of a rogue deck, if you will.
Jump in.
Are we diving in?
Let's dive in.
Okay, I didn't know if we were doing breaks or what we were doing.
I'm doing okay.
All right. Where to begin with this deck? I first went into this deck knowing very little about it. Just like you mentioned, I didn't even know I was doing it until probably a couple days after last week's podcast. I hadn't seen it played online at all. I've never seen anybody use one in all my Pauper experience. So I didn't know what its purpose was, the main focus of the deck, and or its place in the online community. And in some ways, I still don't. I'm still learning. I'm still testing this deck, and I just want to throw it out there right now that I'm not gonna give up on this deck. Either version of it, I have both versions saved, but I'm not giving up on it until I've played a little more thoroughly, and I think I'll do a revisited segment like you did with Affinity in the future. However, despite all that, I really enjoyed playing and tweaking these decks. I really liked the aspect of blue and red together. Izzet Post, by the way, refers to blue and red. I didn't say that, but there isn't necessarily a standardized net deck to go off of. I Googled, and I dove deep into Google trying to find different, standardized net decks for this, and every single one I saw was completely different. Just running things completely differently. And so I kind of took ideas, and I actually polled the casual play room online and asked people what they would interpret as Izzet and or Izzet Post to be, and so that's where I started making these decks from, actually, was the people. So, that said, the Izzet Post is Post being the Locust Lands, the Cloud Post and the Glimmer Post. That's where the name comes from. And then the other one is more of a rogue deck, like I said earlier. I always like to try out what I've created as opposed to putting the best cards together and copy what's been done before, but even so, it was harder to do with that because, like I said, that there wasn't a kind of a standardized deck for this. So I didn't even realize that these were two different decks going into this until I started playing and realized that, what the Izzet Post was as opposed to just an Izzet deck, because I did find both online. The first one, Izzet Post, it's basically a red-blue Locust Land ramp deck for big spells. Typically, and most popular, would be Olamog, like in my last deck, the green ramp deck, or a spell called Rolling Thunder. And I started off with this deck first because, like I said, it was what was known as the more traditional or standard Izzet deck, if you will. And you basically ramp up, similar to the green ramp deck, to play out your big spells. It's a little slower because you don't get the walls that generate land. You don't get the various green spells that pull your land for you. You know, the ability to play extra lands on your turn. So what you really have to do is kind of keep your opponent at bay with counters, burn, removal, and also draw extra cards for yourself for card advantage. And, I mean, all the while you're doing that, you're ramping and gaining life from the Locust Lands, from the Glimmer Posts. So, typically you can get out Ulamog fairly quickly if you pull one. You're faced with the usual problems of having the Ulamog out. You know, not Path to Exile, but Journey to Nowhere, Oblivion Ring, Doom Blades, you know, other big removals that can just completely wreck your day. Or the other thing outside of Ulamog is you can completely wipe the board or tarnish your opponent's health, or both, with Rolling Thunder. I was supposed to get into it in my cards to mention, but I'll just say it right now. Rolling Thunder quickly became one of my favorite cards.
Okay.
I loved it. I was unaware of this card completely before I dove into this deck. Your biggest threat with doing Rolling Thunder is counter. That's really the only threat to it, is having it be countered, and that would really wreck your day, especially if you're tapping all your mana to use it. Sadly, even something as little as a mana leak can do it, because you typically tap out to use a Rolling Thunder. Since the segment on this particular deck is a little smaller, I'm already down to... I'm going to go to my cards to mention.
Actually, I had a question. Real quick.
Sure, jump right in.
So, if you're... And this, I didn't play the deck. I played against it a couple of times. But the version that's trying to ramp into Ulamog, based off of this and the deck you played last week, it almost seems like, to me, if you're wanting to ramp to an Ulamog and win that way, don't play this, play the green deck.
Exactly. Okay. Thank you. You brought that up. I should have put that in my notes. I personally didn't like ramping this way into Ulamog. Exactly like you said, do the green way. It's a lot safer. You have walls out to block.
Yeah.
While producing mana.
And you don't have burn spells, but you're still destroying lands.
Exactly.
So you're getting there. You're getting there just like you would with both decks. But it seems like the mono green deck is a lot more stable and a lot more reliable of a way to do it.
A lot more stable and honestly a lot faster. This deck relies heavily on card draw to get out to pull your extra lands, but you can still only play one land a turn, whereas the green ramp, you're playing two, sometimes if you're lucky, 3 lands a turn.
Yeah, and I mean with the green deck you had the plan B of the Aurochs Herd.
Exactly.
And so I'm guessing the plan B of this is the Rolling Thunder.
That's right.
Okay.
That's correct. Yeah.
All right. So there's a lot of similarities there.
There's similarities there, but yeah, exactly. This deck's a little slower. Yeah, honestly, like you said, play the green ramp if you're going to do the Ulamog. It's more reliable. This deck is fun, but it's not as reliable. And some listeners will disagree, and I'm sure I'll get a few comments on it that I wasn't doing it right, or I'm just
or that you shouldn't have even played it.
Yeah,
well, that was your main concern.
I really wanted to do it justice because I do like red and blue. Blue being my favorite color, but so again, the cards to mention: Cloud Post, Glimmer Post, a key in this deck. I covered them last week. Hopefully, everybody knows how they work, the card prices, sets, everything like that. If you don't, please listen to the last episode. Ulamog, same story. Covered him last week. Everybody knows about him. Rolling Thunder. It's a sorcery speed spell for X red. And it's from Tempest. And card reads, Rolling Thunder deals X damage divided any way you choose among any number of target creatures and or players. Again, it's a very awesome card. when you're ramping mana and you have a good 15, maybe even upwards of 20 mana with all your Locust lands going on, this card is brutal. You can quickly eliminate every creature on the other side of the board, or just go directly for player damage and end the game rather quickly. The most I did directly to a player, I think, was 18 damage.
Jeez.
Yeah. And they didn't last very long, needless to say. If you're going for creature kill, and if they have any kind of ability to buff themselves to give them +1 or save their lives, always go for an extra damage or two, depending on how much mana is untapped on the other side. Leave that in consideration, because they're going to do whatever they can to save all their creatures.
That, just to interject really quick, I found myself doing that with Crypt Rats too in my deck. Mm-hmm. If he's at 4, I'm going to pop it for 6.
Yeah.
Just to make sure. Unless I've got something else to play on my second main phase, which when you're going for your Alpha Strike lethal like that, you usually don't. So that's a good point.
So typically in this build, I ran 3 to 4 Olamogs. I kind of bounce in between here and there. 4 Rolling Thunders, just because it's an incredible spell. And, even if you only have to use it for, half the mana, maybe 8, 10, whatever, it still does considerable damage to creatures or opponents. Nothing like letting a white weenie ramp up with all their Squadron Hawk and just wiping them all out in one turn. That's great. Let's see. I ended up in the final build of this deck doing some kind of Storm mana ramp cards. Typically in the Storm decks, you'll find some of these cards. The Desperate Ritual. It's an instant for 1 and a red. It's from the set Champions of Kamigawa. And it says add 3 red to your mana pool. It's pretty self-explanatory. For 2 red, you get an extra 1. It's relatively cheap. 0.12 tickets. Actually, that was one of the spendier cards in this deck. Aside from, I'm not going to go over the prices of the Cloud Posts. And, basically the Cloud Posts, because I covered those last week. And then just to touch back really quick, the Rolling Thunders were a little bit. They're 0.15 tickets.
Holy smokes.
Yeah, whoa.
It's breaking the bank.
Another one, Rite of Flame. It's a sorcery for red. It's from Cold Snap. Add red to your mana pool. And then add red to your mana pool for each card named Rite of Flame in each graveyard. So it's more mana ramp. That was a little spendy card. 0.90 tickets. Pyretic Ritual. Instant for 1 red. It's from M11. Add red to your mana pool. Dirt cheap card. 0.03 tickets. Final build of this deck, I believe I left Brainstorm in, which actually belonged to you.
And I want them back.
Yeah, you'll get them back. You'll get them back. I couldn't spring for them. But you being the cool friend you are, you let me borrow them. It's an instant for 1 blue. Not 1 in the blue, but just a single blue. It's from many sets, Ice Age, 5th edition, etc., etc. Draw 3 cards, put any 2 cards from your hand on top of your library in any order, and draw a card. It's a good draw card. Especially if you can use it early. Especially if you're playing against your deck. When you've discarded half of your hand anyways.
Then I play one more duress and take that away.
Those are spendy. I didn't buy them myself, like I said, but I believe they're around 2 tickets apiece. That might have been one of our top 20 cards we mentioned, I think.
Brainstorm, it was one of my top 20.
Yeah, so it's definitely a good card. It's definitely worth getting it. I'm sure I'll end up buying my own.
It's like I said when I brought it up. And actually this, a larger point, just to interject for a second, it's really cool to see, for instance, Unearth, which was an ability in the Alara block, to get back and actually play the card that this ability was designed around. And so Brainstorm's the same way. Like I said last week or 2 weeks ago, people talk about playing Jace the Mind Sculptor and brainstorming for his Zero ability. It's like, and we're playing the card that ability is based around. So it's really neat to be playing the history of Magic in these ways.
Oh yeah. Onto it, there's a card called Repeal. Instant for X in blue. It's from the set Guild Pact. Return target non-land permanent with converted mana cost X to its owner's hand and draw a card. I really like this card. You can definitely play it very cheap early game. People have some 1-drops out there, and or 0 drops even. You definitely can get a good card draw early game. Otherwise, later game it's kind of on the spendy side, because if you're trying to return a bigger creature to their hand, typically it's a higher mana cost. In that case, something more like Into the Royal would benefit a little better. Let's see. Moving on to the strengths and weaknesses. The strengths, obviously it's mana ramp. You do some life gain with the Locust lands. Plenty of card draw. And Ulamog, obviously a strength. Rolling Thunder, again, an amazing card. If your Ulamog fails, or if you draw this ahead of Ulamog and you can pull 1 or 2 of these off if necessary. Typically a game ender. I mentioned it earlier, you can do tons of damage, divide it up, wipe the board, kill your opponent, do both. It's really fun to play. I really like Rolling Thunder. I'm going to end up using it in future decks. I really enjoy the card. Against green decks, I'm pretty golden. They don't have quite the removal that white or black has. Mm-hmm. Especially if you're, going up against Ulamog. Blue,
8 Hornet Stings.
8 Hornet Stings. Hey, you can only have 4 in your deck.
You're over-explaining the joke at this point.
Oh. Blue, obviously, if they counter your Rolling Thunder, you're in bad shape. But yeah, it was fairly successful online. I didn't really enjoy playing it. I'm gonna be honest. I didn't enjoy ramping this way. I really liked my green. Every time I played it, I just wish I was playing my green deck.
I think that is a very valid point worth mentioning. And, I think it's important that when we're playing these decks, if there's something that doesn't speak to us, that we are free to say that. If someone's listening and they go, Matt's playing style reminds me of me, and he said he didn't enjoy it, I think that there's value to be gained from that. And there's always value to be gained from being honest with these decks.
I would definitely, like to think that we could be honest with our followers, our listeners.
I hate you.
I know.
I'm kidding.
But it did surprise you and show up for episode 4.
Yeah.
Thought you were going to be doing this alone.
Are you going to get into the friggin' existential crisis you had about this deck?
I might.
All right.
If I get time. Big weaknesses, obviously the discard / early game hand control, like your deck, for example, hurts. It definitely hurts, especially when you're starting with, the perfect hand. You know what lands you need to ramp up with and what cards you need to do the draws with. If that gets hindered in any way possible, it slows the deck down even more, which is something you can't afford to do. I think I mentioned it earlier when I brought up Ulamog. If he gets exiled or Doombladed, your day's over. And countering Rolling Thunder, no bueno. That's right, didn't know you were getting a Spanish lesson, did you? That means no good.
Question?
Yeah.
Let me see. Just from my experience playing it, it seemed like at times you can have a pretty rocky mana base. Is that accurate? Or
it's fairly accurate. I didn't get enough time. Like I said, I was already crunching with this and the other deck, that I didn't feel like the Izzet boiler posts or boiler rooms or whatever they're called, really, I think they really slowed it down more than helped, to be honest. When you have to return a land to your hand and it comes in tapped, it's great the following turn, but sometimes you really need that on your first turn. And I know you can, tap the one land before you have to return it to your hand, but when you're dealing with that and then your cloud posts that also come in tapped, it almost was too cumbersome. And like I said, I didn't get enough time to tweak that to perfection, but the land was a bit rocky, especially at the start of the game.
So here's a deck that seems like obviously blue and red being opposites on the color pie. Just make sure. Yeah, obviously. It seems like
he grabs a magic card. I love it. I do that all the time.
More so than other decks where you are...
Boiler Works. Is it Boiler Works, by the way? That was the dual land. You
can use the enemy colors, and you can do some really unique abilities with those, at least flavor-wise, and from what Wizards has brought to the table. It really seems like this is a deck where the fact that blue and red are opposite ends on the color pie are really hurting each other.
Right.
Red wants to be fast and burn. Blue wants to be slower and control.
Exactly.
And so it's like they're just the fact that they're at odds was really apparent when I was playing against you in this deck.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. And like I said, I would really love to take a little more time with this deck, and I will in the future at my leisure. And I might post different updates and or suggestions on our page. And I definitely welcome anybody out there to, want to suggest and or give me more insight. And I did, like I mentioned earlier, like we both mentioned earlier, that we were working with some of our listeners online with both of our decks even, and they did give me some pointers and kind of steer me in the right direction, but like I said, I just don't feel like I connected with this deck as much as the green ramp.
I want to say too that if you're wanting to play a blue-red deck, don't let us dissuade you.
No, absolutely not. And I'll get into that when I do the next half of this deck.
Okay, cool. Then I'll shut up.
No, it's fine. No, don't shut up.
Yeah.
But seriously, shut up.
I'm done.
Okay. Any other questions, comments, concerns, Chris?
Yeah, hates discard Rocking Mana Base. That seems like it pretty much covered it. I mean...
Yeah. Well, yeah. Moving on, I guess.
You want to take a break really quick?
I really want to take a break really quick.
Pauper to the people.
Pauper to the people. It was fun.
That reminded me of Nick.
Really? Had a bad experience with him, did you?
I did.
Probably not as bad as Reynolds.
No. Hey, we're back.
And we're back.
So, where were we?
I think we took a break right in between. I was going to move on to the next half of my Izzet deck/decks.
The Izzet Rogue?
Yeah.
Or isn't it?
Let's see here. The Izzet Rogue, as I dubbed it. It's actually the funner half of the deck that I made and played. Basically, it's something that I made and evolved, if you will, from the Izzet Post deck and other variations of blue-red decks in the Pauper format that I came across online. It had a lot of stages until it got to where it ended up with, and in a way it's kind of still in the works, but as of tonight, where I left it, I was getting a little happier with it, feeling a little better about it. The basic structure of the deck is based around 2 creatures, and it has burn spells, card draws, And then everything else in the deck is basically buffs that help buff these 2 creatures. And so the entire point is to get out one of these 2 creatures out as quick as possible and play as many spells as you possibly can, buffing them up, giving them various abilities, unblockable, double strike, shroud, plus ups, or a combination of all of them, hopefully fast enough to avoid the removal and finish the job as fast as possible. Like I said, still tweaking a little bit. I'm eventually going to have to end up putting more counter in this deck than I would like, strictly because the deck is so susceptible to removal. There's only 8 creatures in this deck, and the entire deck revolves around those creatures killing your opponent fast.
Are you going to name them, or?
Yeah, I'm getting there.
Right.
First one is Kiln Fiend. It's also a creature that's highlighted in my janky, quote-unquote, Infect deck. It's a creature card for 1 and a red. It's from Rise of Eldrazi. It also has the ability, whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, Kiln Fiend gets +3/+0 until end of turn. He's a fantastic card. He's an amazing card. I think he starts it as a 1/2, I believe. That's his only drawback. None of the spells in this deck buff his health at all, so he's super vulnerable to Lightning Bolt or any kind of lower end damaging spells like that.
Crypt Rat for 2.
Crypt Rat for 2. Other than that, he's a terrific card. He's one of the main focuses of the deck. Like I said, buff him, give him all kinds of abilities, and swing. Definitely fun to make him unblockable, double strike. It's very satisfying when your opponent can't do anything about it. Typically they'll let you waste all of your spells, buff them all up, and then right when you swing, you can throw out an instant that makes them unblockable, and then they're just forced with fudge. Super cheap, 0.05 tickets. Second creature is called We Dragonauts. It's a creature for 1 colorless, 1 blue, and 1 red. So he's 3 mana. He's from the set Guild Pact. And he also has a similar ability. Whenever you play an instant or sorcery spell, it gets +2/+0 until end of turn. He's also the other main focus of the deck. Same greatness as the Kiln Fiend, but he gets 1 less on the attack when you play a spell. But I think to make up for that, he has flying, so that's also very helpful. Also a relatively cheap card, 0.03 tickets. Let's see where I'm at here.
This really kind of is your Infect deck, only without the Infect.
Without the Infect, and with blue. Let's see. Assault Strobe. I'm just going to dive into the cards. Unless you had something to say really quick. No? Yes? No?
Nothing that would... No, I'm good.
Assault Strobe is a sorcery for 1 red, 1 single red. It's from Scars of Mirrodin. Target creature gains double strike until end of turn. It obviously can... It buffs... Every spell buffs a creature, so that's amazing. And double strike is wonderful. Even if you can't pull off the unblockable, at least you'll know that you have the double strike on, so any other creature that's going to block it, you're going to hopefully kill it first before it can touch your creature, especially because, both of these have low health. I believe, actually, the We Dragonaut starts at 1/2 also. Not 100% sure, but pretty sure. Another card I liked is Veil of Secrecy. It's an instant for 1 and a blue.
Veil.
Veil's
a baby cow.
That's right. You know how to make veal is they tie the baby cows down, and so their muscles can't develop from standing and doing daily activities. And then they just keep them tied down. Like, PETA really hates it.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Sounds delicious.
Yeah, and then they slaughter them while they never get to walk and run around and play, really. Yeah. Sorry, skewed off into a tangent there. This card's from Betrayers of the Kamigawa. Target creature is unblockable and has Shroud. Terrific card, especially if you're going to have any kind of removal coming your way. Most of the time, I play it right away, but sometimes I'll save it just in case of the removal. I typically play it right away just because I know I want to buff my creatures at least one more time. Also, because it has Shroud, make sure you play all of your other spells before you do this one. I've made that fatal error a couple of times. I keep track of, while keeping track of my mana, I'm like, okay, I have enough for that spell, this spell, and oh yeah, Assault Strobe, I'll give him Double Strike. And I made the fatal error one game that it definitely would have won me the game had I not done this, but I gave it the Veil of Secrecy before...
Veil.
I said it wrong twice? Oh, I died twice. Veil of Secrecy. I played that before the Assault Strobe, cost me the game. Because then I couldn't play the Assault Strobe. Yeah. So definitely don't do that. I don't recommend it. Another card that I came across while playing this deck, I believe this card was actually recommended to me, is called Reckless Charge. It's a sorcery speed spell for a single red. It's from Odyssey. Target creature gets +3/+0 and gains haste until end of turn. Now this is a terrific card because you can swing with one of your creatures right away. Also buffing them, not only buffing them from their natural ability on the card, but also it gives them +3. Just amazing card. Also, it has a flashback ability for 2 and a red, so you can play it from your graveyard for the flashback ability, and so therefore if you have enough mana in its later game, if you end up drawing one of your creatures, you can give it haste right away and go in for the kill. Also a relatively cheap card, 0.08 tickets. Another card that I came across is called Shadow Rift. It's an instant for a single blue. It's from the set Tempest. Target creature gains Shadow until end of turn, which Shadow was an ability I was unfamiliar with until I found this card, but it's creature can block or only be blocked by creatures with Shadow. So typically, I've not found another deck that relies heavily on this ability, so typically basically means your creatures become unblockable. And also, the secondary ability of this card is you get a draw card. So it's an amazing card for 1 blue. Make your guy unblockable, and you get a draw card. Instant speed again, and it's relatively cheap, 0.02 tickets. And that probably wraps it up. I went through those kind of quickly as far as the good cards.
Question.
Sure.
So, what's your creature to pump ratio?
Sadly, it's not the best. I have a ton of pump spells, and honestly, even with some of my card draw spells, the Brainstorms and the Shadow Rifts, like I said, you can draw. Sometimes I end up doing a Shadow Rift on...
Shadow Whiff.
Sorry.
No, that's cool.
On turn 1, when somebody drops out a 1-drop, I'll do it on their turn just to get an extra card draw. I typically end up with a handful of pumps and or card draws and or counters and no creatures. It's definitely not good. I'll usually mulligan until I start with a creature and 2 mana. It's typically what I need to get going. Anything else is just bonus. The sooner you can get out your creatures, the better, especially because Oblivion Ring takes 3 mana, so if you can get your creature out turn 2, terrific. I guess. That forces them to turn 3 to strictly use their Oblivion Ring and nothing else. This deck heavily relies on speed. It usually doesn't see late game. If it goes on late game, this deck's pretty much done, to be honest. I have maybe 1 or 2 games later game, but it's just strictly luck. I mean, top decking the heck out of things. So yeah, the creature to pump ratio is not good. I could probably tweak it a little more to balance it a little better, but So far, it works out okay. I have fun with it. I guess that's the main point. Any other brain busters?
No, I mean, that pretty much answers it.
Okay. And again, I worked with a couple of our listeners on this deck, even right up till tonight before I left the house. I was working on it with a few listeners, and I'm not completely set on where it's at right now, but it does okay. And I have fun with it, but I would really like to maybe add a little more counter, maybe remove a couple pump spells and add a little more counter to help keep my creatures alive a little longer and or in the game. Ended up settling on a sideboard from a suggestion from a listener. When the sideboard basically ended up being kind of a very small semi-storm variant, which basically utilized the Mana Excel cards that I mentioned from the last build to dump into a spell called Empty the Warrens. Basically, well, what Empty the Warrens is it's a sorcery spell for 3 and a red. It's from the set Time Spiral. And it says, put 2 1/1 red goblin creature tokens into play, and then it also has Storm, which means when you play this spell, copy it for each spell played before it this turn. So basically the idea would be to get as many creatures out as possible while, doing card draws, just basic pumps, whatever you can to ramp this card. All the various Mana Excel, the Pyretic Rituals, and Rite of Flame, cards of that nature that I mentioned from the last build, to get this card out and basically overwhelm your opponent with weenie goblins. Is basically the deck idea. I'm still playing with that as far as the sideboard goes. Probably add a Goblin Bushwhacker or 2 in there. And that card, that Empty the Warrens card, is relatively cheap, 0.08 tickets. So I'll move on to the strengths and weaknesses. The creatures you do have in this deck are cheap, 2 and 3 mana. You almost always have at least 1 red and 1 blue, so getting out even the wee Dragonauts, the multicolored one, isn't a big deal. And the great thing about it is your small, cheap creatures just turn into huge powerhouses that they get out there and they turn into these powerhouses real fast and early, and they swing for huge amounts of damage. They work very well against decks with little to no removal, which I know it's almost unheard of, but it happens. And or games that have against decks that have just a few little early game blockers. Turn your creatures unblockable and double strike is just a complete fatal combination, especially while you're buffing your creatures in the meantime. I mean, it's not unheard of to get your Kiln Fiend to a 7 with double strike and swing in for 14 by turn 2 or by turn 3.
Evil. Yeah,
definitely. I've gotten him. I think today is the highest I saw him. I got him to 18, I think. 18 with double strike, I believe is what I got him to.
So you got your Kiln Fiend the highest on 420?
Oh, Jesus. I didn't know we were going there.
It just occurred to me.
Your eyes are kind of red and bloodshot. What have you been doing?
I'm tired.
Yeah, right. That's what they all say. I'm tired. Don't drug test me. I'm just tired.
I work for the probation at the district court level. I'm not on anything.
Weaknesses are removal. Removal's huge. You only have 8 creatures in this deck, so removal is definitely your enemy. Again, I'm probably going to end up adding a lot more counter spells in this deck just to keep the creatures alive from the removal. I didn't start out that way because I liked the idea of getting them out early and pumping them as much as possible more than worrying about keeping them alive and out there with the counter spells. Even though the counter spells would work and buff them all the same. Let's see here. Like I mentioned earlier, Shroud is a great spell, but when you misuse Shroud and you end up using it against yourself, that's definitely a weakness. That's no bueno. Also, a weakness I came across that I felt that was a weakness is having to wait to play the creatures just so you can have enough mana to maybe give them Shroud when you do want them to have Shroud so that they can't be removed while they're swinging. Let's see. Things to look out for and or closing comments. Again, look out for discard and hand control. Exile spells, the Journey Nowheres, Oblivion Rings are bad. Lightning Bolts will take care of either one of these creatures. And just keep them alive long enough to swing, because when you can swing, you've won the game. Total deck cost for this, not including the Brainstorms, because again I've borrowed those, but it was only about 4 tickets. This deck is relatively cheap.
So Brainstorm would effectively double the cost.
Yeah, more than that.
Something to keep in mind.
Yeah, but again though, the thing is about Brainstorm is that I think it's considered a staple card.
Oh yeah, definitely.
So really,
it's not a negative or a positive. It's just something to look out for.
Exactly. It's not negative by any means. It's something that you might even actually already have because it is considered a staple card. So I don't have my own yet. I'll get there. I'm still a young Padawan. That's about it. Again, it's very fun to play. I'll be posting the deck list online. You guys can leave me suggestions, comments, challenge me, flame me, whatever. Hate. Any questions, any concerns you wanted to add?
No, I think you covered it. I mean, like I said, the big one was if you're playing this to ramp out Ulamog, why not just play green?
Yeah, definitely.
So.
Moving on.
Comments and emails. Almost done.
Almost done.
So we've reached enough Facebook likes to change the name of the page, which we've done. So,
I love it.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks to everyone who liked us.
Thanks all 26 of you.
I think we're up to 27 now.
Oh, watch out. Actually, I have it pulled up right here. Let's see.
He's taking his pants off.
I said I have it pulled up, not pulled down. 27, you're
27 likes. So, a couple of emails and comments on the MTG Cast on the Facebook page. Let's see here. Doc Howard brought up the idea on our Facebook page of using Trinket Mage in the Affinity deck. So I've added him in, and we'll be testing and bringing the results to the table. So I cut a Chromatic Star, a Springleaf Drum, a Carapace Forger, and a Frogmite to make room for 4 of the Trinket Mage, with the idea that tutoring artifacts would make up for a smaller number of them. So,
I get it. Yeah, that makes sense.
So thanks for that. Maddie Palola wanted to know some information about starting out on MTGO and what staples he should begin acquiring at a decent price. So we'll be hitting that up in some casts to follow. That's definitely worthwhile.
And like, just jumping in on that, my notes for comments and emails that I personally, I know you keep on top of it a little more, but I personally haven't had a chance to look and read all the comments and or emails. I would love to kind of take more time to do that, and hopefully maybe in a future episode, maybe we can dedicate an entire episode, if not an entire episode, but at least a large segment of covering just people's comments and emails and questions.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea.
Yeah, because, I mean, they're really flooding in, and squeezing in a couple here and there each episode just almost isn't cutting it.
Yeah, and by the same token, we don't want people to think that we're not reading them and we're not appreciating the support we're getting.
Right. I mean, I didn't mean for it to sound like I don't read them.
No, you didn't. I just,
okay.
I wanted to reiterate that fact.
Yeah, no, I definitely read them all, but if I don't get a chance to reply online or even mention it in the podcast here, it's not that I haven't read it, but it's just that we'll get to it. This thing's just taken off huge.
Yeah, and right now we're still trying to get through the main decks in the archetype and, just kind of give people who are new to the format too, or even people who want a refresher, a starting point.
Yeah. But yeah, I love the comments and emails and suggestions. Please keep them coming. We'll get to them.
So Iggly Bob and Grappling Farang spent some time with us online Tuesday night, running over last minute changes and hanging out.
Yeah.
So big thanks to the both of them for some fun times.
Great thanks. They were great help. Especially to me, they were both taking turns, and with you, all three of you were taking turns helping me play test my deck, making a few last minute changes and suggestions here and there.
Yeah, and actually Iggly Bob also brought up some good changes, ideas for both the White Weenie and the Green Ramp decks. So we'll be giving them a spin and reporting on how they work.
Yeah, most definitely.
So now, through email, Dave Hernandez says he's having a hell of a good time as a new Pauper player on mTGO. So I wanted to say thanks to all of you Pauper players out there for being awesome to us new guys. And thanks to Dave for saying, hey, we'll be sure to challenge you online shortly.
That's right.
Yeah.
Better bring it. I just want to give a shout out to my good friend Kurt from Michigan. I've played World of Warcraft with this gentleman for quite a few years up until I retired from the game. And I recently got him in the Magic Online within the last week and immediately directed him to Pauper just because being a new player to online in general, it's, I think, just a great way to get into it, especially for, you know, how cheap it is. The initial $10 to start up online plus a couple more tickets, and you've got a Pauper deck and you're playing. So
yep.
Just want to give him a shout out, and hopefully he's liking Magic and the Pauper format. He'd probably be playing it a lot more if he wasn't on Portal 2.
So that does it as far as the comments and the emails I had.
Terrific.
Awesome. So I wanted to say that this has truly so far been a wild ride. It's taking off at a rate even we didn't expect.
I did not expect it. I mean, it's blown up. I mean, all of you listeners out there are just sending us comments and emails, and it's terrific, and I love it all. And especially when I'm getting recognized online, it goes straight to my head. I love it. I'm like, hey, you're the guy at the podcast.
So if you're listening to this, then we owe you some thanks for making all this happen.
I love you all.
So hugs,
and every one of you.
Hugs and kisses all around.
That was weird.
That was weird. Do you have anything else you wanted to add?
No, man, that wraps it up. Other than I'm really digging this. I love the podcast, and I love playing, and I love doing this for the people, you guys.
There were some people who wanted to know what we were doing, you know, in the week ahead, so they could kind of see what to plan out for.
Oh, yes.
And I'm actually going to take on the Black-Red Blightning deck.
Which I think
has it's starting to rear its head a lot more. It was actually a deck that I bought a lot of the guts for, and when Alara was in Standard, I played a lot of Grixis, so I love me some Blightning.
Yeah.
So I'm going to take that one on for next week.
So tell me what I should do.
It's up to you, man.
No, man.
You're going to do the green-white auras, I thought.
Oh, yeah, that's right. I am doing that.
So.
That's right.
So we'll be hitting all the colors but blue next week.
Good.
Cool.
Hate blue. I'm just kidding. I love blue.
So to all you out there, have a great week. Play some mTGO Pauper or in person. And most importantly, keep being awesome to each other.
Definitely. I think I have a fairly clean plate this weekend, so maybe I can meet up with some of you online.
Yeah, we'll be looking for you guys. So until next week, my name's Chris.
And my name's Matt.
And this is Pauper to the People.
Pauper to the People.
Awesome. Woo! Made it.
Another day made in the shade.
So I got a couple of ideas for the title. I want to run them by you, get your thoughts.
Okay.
First one I came up with was actually before we even started recording, and that was episode 4 of 3.
Okay, a little inside joke, I get it.
So I've also got Veil of Secrecy.
That's funny, because right after I messed up the second time, I already thought of that.
And then also Shadow Whiff.
That one's not as funny because I didn't say it twice, but Wheel of Secrecy is probably...
So I was thinking what we could do is, we could also do like You know how those old movies had the two titles? You could do Veil of Secrecy or Shadow Wind.
We could call it episode 4 of 3, Veil of Secrecy.
God, this sounds like a really bad fantasy novel.
Perfect. I'm a tool shed.
You ever do that, though, when you look in the mirror? Right after you get out of the shower and you're like...
Yeah, dude. I grabbed my wife's lipstick and I put it on and I'm like, I do me.
He's looking to get fucked.
Classic.